Hey everyone, welcome. Big love to my global family, and if this is your first time here, we're honored to have you join us. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. China creeps into US banks, while Trump rallies for a ground war in Yemen with UAE support. China has started making moves into the American banking system, while Trump is gearing up for a ground invasion in Yemen with backing from the UAE, and at the same time struggling to deal with Iran. The trade war between the US and China is escalating and reaching dangerous new levels, especially in the financial sector. Recent reports reveal that China managed to infiltrate communication systems between US banks and the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, OCC, a key institution overseeing the US dollar and treasury bonds. This kind of sensitive data isn't supposed to end up in foreign hands, but China now has access to some extremely confidential information. As a result, investors are starting to distance themselves from US Treasury bonds and the dollar, diversifying their portfolios in ways that could seriously threaten the stability of the American financial system, especially if things escalate into a full-blown financial war. Meanwhile, Trump's administration seems to be stumbling in two critical areas of the Middle East, Yemen and Iran.
More details are emerging about a planned ground invasion of Yemen, particularly the coastal city of Al-Hudaydah. The attack is expected to launch from the south with support from the UAE. The Wall Street Journal just published fresh updates confirming what had been reported only a couple of days ago.
At the same time, there's confusion over US policy toward Iran.
First, there were some bizarre comments from Steve Wietof during a Fox News appearance, where he made bold claims about negotiations with Iran, only to backtrack on Twitter later. After that, an emergency meeting was held in the White House Situation Room, bringing together Trump's full team to discuss the faltering talks with Iran.
All of this is happening at an especially risky time, given China's increasing cyber activity targeting the US financial system. They've tapped into OCC communications and accessed secret exchanges with major banks like JP Morgan.
Clearly, China is collecting data and building a detailed map of the financial system, which suggests they're either preparing for or anticipating a financial conflict, and they need this intel for strategic planning. This development is extremely serious and could provoke a strong response from the US.
Still, it looks like China is ready for those accusations. After all, Beijing has previously accused Washington of hacking and spying, even during the Winter Olympics, claiming the US was spying on Chinese officials. These are rare formal allegations from China, and they're only adding fuel to the fire.
China has even publicly admitted to cyber attacks on US financial institutions, particularly those related to Taiwan. And when cyber war collides with an active trade war, the conflict becomes deeper and more dangerous, moving from financial tension toward the possibility of a full-scale global war.
All this comes at a time when the US seems unprepared for any kind of military conflict with China over Taiwan, especially while still entangled in Middle Eastern affairs. Military simulations suggest the US would suffer heavy losses, and its European allies wouldn't fare much better.
China is also applying strategic economic pressure in other ways. For example, Beijing recently cancelled all aircraft orders from American giant Boeing. China, long one of Boeing's biggest markets, is sending a clear message by halting both aircraft purchases and parts orders. This doesn't just give European manufacturer Airbus a bigger foothold, it also boosts China's bargaining power with the EU, especially as their trade talks with the US aren't going well. China is playing its cards smartly. It's cutting off rare earth metal exports, blocking Boeing deals and opening the door wide for Airbus to grab more market share. It's all part of a bigger strategy to use Europe's position in the trade war to negotiate separate deals that would sideline the US and its Asian allies. There's another key player in this equation, India. Eager to become the world's second-largest manufacturing power, India is actively positioning itself to capture a slice of China's $15 trillion GDP and shift the global balance. It wants to increase manufacturing share of its GDP from the current 13% to something much higher, maybe even 30 or 50%. But the truth is, India just isn't ready to fill the gap China would leave behind. Its manufacturing sector still struggles with underfunding and lacks the scale needed to truly compete, at least for now. Right now, manufacturing makes up only about 13% of India's GDP. Compare that to smaller competitors like Vietnam, where the industrial sector accounts for 23 to 25% of the economy, almost double India's share over the past decade. India has followed a lot of the same old advice that China once did when it started building its manufacturing base. The idea is, before you build factories, you need roads. You can't set up manufacturing centers without good infrastructure. You need roads, ports, and a reliable power supply in place first. So over the last 10 years, India has been pouring money into infrastructure, building highways, bridges, airports, seaports, and power grids. But this heavy investment has come at the expense of other priorities. And even with all that, it took China 40 years to reach its current industrial power. India also faces a major shortage of skilled labor. The problem isn't cheap labor. Global companies are willing to pay more if the workers are highly skilled, especially in sensitive fields like tech. But India lacks a massive workforce of trained engineers and technicians. We're not talking about needing a few thousand skilled workers. We're talking millions. China already has a huge pool of well-trained workers and engineers who can deliver at scale and low cost. India is far behind in this area, and catching up could take 20 years or more, which is about how long it took China. So the idea that India can suddenly replace China in global supply chains, especially with the US-China trade war heating up, just isn't realistic. There's another big challenge to becoming a true global manufacturing powerhouse. It's not just about infrastructure, skilled labor, or good working conditions. You also need a stable and efficient legal system. In China, for example, only about 14% of commercial disputes actually go to court. Most are resolved through arbitration or private settlements. In contrast, India's legal system is heavily backed up. On average, there's only about 1.5 courts per 100,000 people, and over 50 million cases are stuck in the legal system. This slow, inefficient judicial process is a huge turn-off for foreign investors and startups looking to grow in India. All of these factors play to China's advantage, especially as tensions with the US continue rising. Meanwhile, Trump's administration is still struggling with its strategy in Yemen. A recent article in the Wall Street Journal revealed more details about a planned ground invasion targeting al-Hudaydah, with troops expected to move in from the south under UAE sponsorship. Interestingly, the article mentioned that Trump is tired of the ongoing US air campaign in Yemen. It hasn't achieved much. He clearly sees it as a failure and doesn't want to get pulled into a long, costly military conflict.
The Trump administration knows the risks, especially with strategic weapons stockpiles and tech potentially falling into the wrong hands at a critical moment, like if China decides to blockade Taiwan. If Taiwan is cut off from exporting semiconductors, especially the kind used by companies like Nvidia, it could throw the entire US tech sector into chaos.
Back in Yemen, the plan is for ground forces loyal to Tariq Saleh and the Southern Transitional Council to lead the operation, backed by a coalition similar to previous invasion attempts supported by the US, UK and Europe. But this time, Trump seems hesitant to commit. The UAE has been pushing hard for Trump's approval, and he might offer limited air support in return, but he doesn't want to get deeply involved. His approach is to let others handle the ground fighting while the US sticks to minimal support, like intel sharing, advisory roles via military contractors, and reconnaissance.
This cautious approach partly comes from the fact that US MQ-9 Reaper drones have suffered heavy losses in Yemen. The UAE is expected to handle most of the air support this time, which has already raised tensions with the Houthis. The Wall Street Journal even noted that Saudi Arabia isn't fully on board with the operation. Reportedly, Riyadh has told its allies in Yemen that it wants no part in this new offensive and has distanced itself from the UAE's plans.
From the Houthis' perspective, this whole situation fits into a broader narrative, that the operation is ultimately designed to benefit Israel by easing Yemeni military pressure on it and helping reduce the heat in Gaza. That narrative gives the Houthis strong political leverage. They're already preparing to cause serious problems, and if this continues, it could spiral into another messy, unresolved conflict, just like the others the US is already stuck in. Things have already escalated. There are now waves of drone attacks, with operations happening in phases 3, 4, 5, and even 6, and this is far from over.
Pick any target you want. The UAE's Patriot systems keep responding every time there's an attack, and with each announcement, it's clear that the strikes are actually landing. Now imagine this. The UAE, a major financial hub, is facing a serious threat. It's bound to have huge consequences. Honestly, it's not a smart move, but that's the conclusion I got from the article, regardless of anything about Biden, since he's already failing anyway. The real takeaway? Trump is just tired of the whole Yemen situation. He wants to wash his hands of it and pull out, and that's music to Israel's ears. Think about it. If the US is struggling this badly in Yemen, officially getting beaten, and every desperate attempt to shift the balance keeps failing, then the only lesson to be learned will probably take another 10 years of trying, if they're lucky.
Meanwhile, Steve Wietof went on Fox News and tried to spin the story, saying,
Our main goal is to reduce Iran's uranium enrichment.
he claimed the US doesn't mind Iran enriching uranium, but just wants it limited to 3.65%, like under Obama's old nuclear deal. But hold on a second, didn't they say they wanted to dismantle Iran's entire nuclear program? Now suddenly they're okay with Iran enriching uranium on its own soil? That's a huge behind-the-scenes reversal. The Guardian reported the real issue. Iran's stockpile of 60% enriched uranium is nearing 300 kilograms. The US wanted Iran to send some of it to a third party, maybe even ship it to Russia during negotiations, but Iran flat out refused. They said,
I'm not sending anything anywhere. I'll store it myself. You can come and inspect it whenever you want. If you find 100 kilograms and ask why it's not 300, I'll just say, who told you it was 300? I'm only admitting to 100.
So, yeah, Iran said no to handing over its stockpile. Still, Wietof keeps pushing for a deal that lets Iran enrich uranium locally, but under international monitoring. Iran, however, completely rejects any oversight of its ballistic missile program. Basically, Wietof backed off from the idea of dismantling the whole nuclear program and started talking about allowing enrichment on Iranian soil. That really upset Israel. He tried to walk it back with a tweet claiming the US still wants full dismantlement, but the damage was done.
At the same time, Trump called an emergency meeting at the White House. He brought in people like Pete Hegseth, Mike Waltz, Marco Rubio, Steve Wietof, and J.D. Vance, according to Axios. Vance and Wietof were trying to pitch a compromise, basically a reboot of the Obama-era 2015 Iran deal, the JCPOA. Back then, the US gave Iran a timeline of 10 to 15 years, which many criticized. Now they're trying to push for a permanent limit, something open-ended. But Iran came to the table with a much stronger hand. Their attitude is basically,
we already made a deal with the US. You all saw it. Now you're asking me to send my uranium to Russia just for your peace of mind?
J.D. Vance knows the trap here. He's aware that if the US tries something reckless militarily, it won't stop Iran's nuclear program. It'll just make things worse. An attack might actually push Iran to build a bomb faster, just like North Korea did. Everybody, from Reuters to international experts, says the same thing. Iran already has around 300 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, 15,000 plus advanced centrifuges, including IR-6 models, and underground facilities and secret storage sites. A military strike wouldn't destroy the program. It would motivate Iran to complete it faster.
Imagine the US keeps bombing, things escalate, and then Iran conducts a nuclear test, maybe in the Iraqi mountains or even the Gulf. At that point, there's no turning back. Vance gets that, and Wietof seems to realize he's been outplayed in the Oman talks, so now he just wants to bow out quietly. Thanks so much for watching. Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Here at X News, we're committed to bringing you quality updates. See you soon in the next video.